Hello, everybody, and welcome to Inside Politics. I'm John King in Washington. Thank you for sharing a very important day with us. Blockbuster new data today on Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine. The company says it is safe and extraordinarily effective in kids as young as age 12. Two big global developments also. The Secretary of State is in the Middle East right now and says the United States will help rebuild Gaza. And the White House says a summit between Presidents Biden and Putin will happen next month in Switzerland. Plus, leaders by title, but hardly in practice. 5 days later, and only after outrage by Jewish groups, top Republicans in Congress today finally criticized Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene for comparing mask mandates to the horrors of the Holocaust. Up first, though, a somber anniversary today and a question: what has changed in the 365 days since a Minneapolis police officer murdered George Floyd? Mr. Floyd's family is here in Washington today. They meet with the president next hour. Republicans later this hour. You see right here the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, meeting with the family right now. This visit to Washington coming as negotiators on Capitol Hill trying to work out the details of a national police reform bill, and they say they're getting close to a breakthrough. Around the country today, celebrations of Mr. Floyd's life. This is today's Minneapolis Star-Tribune front page right here. It's all black. You see there in the white type, reflections from Minnesotans on George Floyd's murder in a year filled with racial angst. The quotes include a big question the country is still trying to answer. How are we different now, 1 year later? Let's get straight to CNN's Omar Jimenez. He is live for us in Minneapolis on this somber day of reflection. Omar, what is the scene there today?
Well, John, it is going to be a day of reflection and remembrance, but it's also going to be a celebration of the life and legacy of George Floyd, highlighted by music, art, speakers who in some cases have been devastated by police violence themselves. Now, of course, the protests of May 2020 here in Minneapolis have long subsided, but now the attention turns to leadership here who are hoping to enact policy that actually makes a difference in the long term. But what we found is that there are differences in opinion on how to move forward. There are no perfect solutions, and many of the issues they are trying to deal with now, they've been dealing with for decades, John.
Omar Jimenez live for us in Minneapolis. Let's go back up now live to Capitol Hill and look at some of these pictures of Pelosi's. Let's listen into this event right now, the family of George Floyd with the House Speaker.
Stepped out, and they've been working tremendously to help push the issue to get this law passed. I thank y'all so much. Our family stands with you all in here today. Thank you all.
Now, the family is going to be welcomed by the President at the White House. In the meantime, they're going to the Senate side. So we want them to stay on schedule. And again, we welcome you. Next time, hopefully we can have a meal together and celebrate the passage of the bill, and that should be very soon. So thank you,
Thank you. Press, we're going to exit the same way we came in, please. So press, please, we're going to exit the same door we came in. Thank you.
Hard to hear some of that because of the combination of masking and the mics being at a distance, but the Speaker of the House and other congressional Democrats there welcoming the Floyd family. They said the meetings of the Senate side as well, also going down to the White House. The Floyd family also going down to the White House today. With me in studio to share their insights on this important day, our CNN senior political analyst, Nia Malika Henderson, White House reporter for the Wall Street Journal, Trini Porti. Let's start right there. You see that scene. That is different. Many of these families are sadly quickly forgotten after the local media coverage, after maybe a day or two, perhaps a little bit longer. Most of these families are forgotten. We did have the summer of protests. We did have a big change in this country. And listen to Philonise Floyd, George Floyd's brother, this morning, saying more work to be done, but he thinks actually, yes, George Floyd's death is going to make a difference.
It's been 1 year. And she had to watch the same thing everybody across the world has to watch, him being murdered on a video. I think things have changed. I think that it's moving slowly, but it's making progress. I just want everything to be better in life because I don't want to see people dying the same way my brother has passed.
Bless Mr. Floyd. He has been so active and continuing, and he's very calm and very patient. And he was talking there about his his niece, his brother's daughter, who has to still see the video every time it's played about her father dying under the knee of a cop. Meetings are one thing, but is there progress? Is there actual progress on the issues at the core of this?
There does seem to be some progress here. And listen, if you think about the history of the fight for equality in this country, often it has come because there's been a real visual documentation of brutality. You think about Emmett Till, those photos of his battered face in Jet magazine. You think about the civil rights movement, the images of dogs nipping the heels of black children. And here, this video, 9 minutes, this man lying on the concrete, videotaped by a young woman in her neighborhood. And so I think that is the difference. You've seen white people who in large part had sort of ignored the pleas and cries about police brutality that black people have been talking about for decades. They have moved on this. They are much more likely to see systemic racism in this country, and more specifically when it comes to police interactions with African Americans. So that is different. If you flash back a year ago, Tim Scott was not hopeful about anything coming out of Congress with this police bill. He's very confident at this point, as well as other members of his party, as well as Democrats as well. So there does seem to be progress here. And listen, it came again because of this video that was so brutal that everyone across the globe was outraged by. And finally, a lot of the complaints. I mean, you think about Martin Luther King in his speech, the March on Washington, he talked about the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. And there it was for all the world to see on that video.
Right. The generational change difference with the videos, the cameras, everyone having essentially, everyone can be a filmmaker, if you will. Important in this case. Let's bring into our conversations as well LaTosha Brown, the co-founder of Black Voters Matter. LaTosha, grateful you can join us on this day. And let's pick up on the point Nia Malika Henderson is making. Again, this family is meeting with the most powerful people in the United States government up on Capitol Hill. They're about to meet with the most powerful man in the world, the President of the United States, the first woman of color who is the Vice President of the United States. So in that, there is progress. The family is not being forgotten. But I want to read from this Axios Ipsos poll just out today to get at some of the core issues and the views from the African American, the black community on these big issues. Do police treat everybody equally? Only 5% of black Americans think that. Have race relations improved? Only 11% of black Americans think that. Calling police does more harm. More than half, 55% of African Americans in this country think you pick up the phone to call for help and you might do more harm than good. And 80% say there's still a lot of racism in the United States. LaTosha, 1 year after the murder of George Floyd, where are we?
You know, I think that when we're talking about progress, that's part of what I think has been the problem in America. I think we've all hidden behind this context of American exceptionalism, that if we can see a little progress, then we can ignore the systemic issue that has really not been addressed. That as we do see some level and elements of progress, I think that it's wonderful that the family is meeting with some of the powerful folks in this country. I think it's wonderful that we've seen policy. The truth of the matter is we have not dealt with a systemic issue of while structural racism has been part of the development, has been part of the creation of police. And so what we're seeing now is we're continuously, every 2 days, there's another video that comes out where there's an abuse of power with state-sanctioned violence. And so I think if we want to take this opportunity, yes, there are small steps that have been made, but we are not uprooting. It's kind of like having weeds in the yard. You can cut the weeds down, when you're mowing the grass, but until you uproot or kill the weeds, it will still take over your yard. And so what we're seeing right now, we have got to deal with the systemic, ongoing structural issue that is dealing with policing in this country, the context of it, even when we're saying not just an issue of equity, but an issue of humanity. That at the end of the day, what we saw with George Floyd, what we've seen with numerous other cases, has really been an offense on the humanity, of our country, of people in general. And so I think that that's what we have to look at this with too. We can have both. Yes, in the midst of there being some progress, that we have to really recognize that we're still fighting the same battle that we've been fighting in this country for over 400 years.
Which it's a very important contextual point. It's a critical contextual point that no piece of legislation is going to solve. No piece. The Civil Rights Act, you know, enormous progress. Please don't get me wrong. But then you have to build trust on the streets. People have to change their behavior. So a police reform bill, if they can get this to the finish line, Tarini, very important. If you can ban chokeholds, if you can make some changes, whether you eliminate qualified immunity or make some changes so that it's easier to bring police officers and police departments into court to hold them accountable. The three key leaders of the negotiations, 2 Democrats and a Republican, Senators Booker, Scott, and Congressman Bass, issued a joint statement. They wanted it done by this day. They can't get there. But they say they're still talking. We're still working through our differences on key issues. We continue to make progress toward a compromise and remain optimistic about the prospects of achieving that goal. To Latasha's point, critical for the issue to be addressed, but as a building block. If you can make changes, no chokeholds, treat people more fairly, put some new training in for police, that's a stepping stone, hopefully, to building the trust in the community.
Right, that's just one step. And, you know, they haven't gotten to that finish line yet. There is still a lot of work to be done. And the trick here, of course, is getting 10 Republicans to support whatever proposal they come up with, and also keeping those progressives in the House who are already concerned that whatever proposal they come up with might not include those changes to qualified immunity that they want. So there's still some details obviously left to be figured out, but it is one step. And then, you know, in terms of the progress in the past year, we also do have an administration that's talking about racial equity more and more. They do talk about how that needs to be the center of any sort of public policy. So, you know, of course, there's a long way to go, as the poll you cited just showed us. But there have been some steps taken by lawmakers and by the administration that shows that there might be some changes as a result of what happened tragically last year.
And so, Latasha, back into the conversation, if you would. I just want to put up on the screen here, we're having a Washington conversation. conversation. That's where the show is based, and the family is here meeting with high-powered officials in Washington today. But this was an issue. We saw the marches all around the country. We saw promises from governors, from mayors, from state legislatures. Here's what we know happened. There were 572 bills introduced across 46 states in the District of Columbia. So there were a lot of promises of action. 54 of those measures were enacted. These are different kinds of police reforms proposals in 24 states. So it is a big issue and was a big issue in the rearview mirror. I want you to listen. New York City is about to have a mayoral primary. Police reform is a giant issue right now.
Defund the police is the wrong approach for New York City.
I'm going to take $1 billion from the New York City Police Department to shift that money to create trauma-informed care in our schools. I'm going to have a civilian police commissioner because we are going to make it a truly accountable police force to the public.
Safety is not synonymous with policing. Our communities are over-policed and under-resourced.
How would you say, Latasha, as someone who organizes voters, how has the conversation, both from a animated to vote, people animated to vote because these issues are front and center in their mind, so from the voter perspective and from the politician's perspective, you hear a number of Republicans now saying, well, you see crime statistics going up. This is going to become a refund the police debate.
You know, it is, you know, we're really in this space that I feel like we often go through the hamster wheel. You know, what I think is important is that defund the police for all its critics. The bottom line is we are talking about police reform. For a number of years, we could not even have that conversation. Not in a way that we were really talking about policy that would change the nature of policing in this country. And so the fact that we're talking about it, the fact that it is on the surface right now, and that it is a debate and that it is a key issue actually says something. And I think that speaks to kind of the organizing, the movement work that was happening. But I also think that the underlying issue that creates this in the first place is that we have a problem in this country around not really dealing with the problems in community and addressing communities, but just these punitive measures that is really based on how we punish, how we can inflict more pain, how we can put more people in jail, how we can actually put more harsh sentences. That instead of having a society that we're building that really is about redemption and how can we actually build our communities stronger, that we have this approach that the way that we'll solve any problem is just being punitive. That's not worked well for us. That to be a country that has this police force, we're actually the most violent country in the world. And so I think we have to really take a look back at really what is the core issue of what we're debating here. It's not, we should not, at some point, we are actually politicizing, over-politicizing people's lives. Now it's a question of who is in control. Who can the police control? They're going to get those bad people after you. And so we walk around that we're fearful of our neighbors instead of literally using those resources and really taking a step back to move beyond this political context, to really think about how can we build a society that people are respected and honored and that we are less violent. Instead, our approach to violence is let's create more violence. Let's give more violent tools to the police. And so I think that this is a debate that is really far beyond politicizing as a policy issue. This is really centered in a values issue. What kind of nation are we attempting to build?
Latasha Brown, grateful for your insights in this important day. Tarini and Nia are going to stay with us as we continue the conversation on another issue, and it is this: leaders who follow. Top Republicans finally criticized Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's latest outrage, a comparison of mask mandates, vaccine passports to the Holocaust. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is mad this hour, and she is ranting on Twitter again. Why? Because 5 days late, but finally today, the top Republicans in Congress decided to condemn her for comparing mask mandates to the Holocaust. Outrageous and reprehensible were among the words used by the Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell this morning. The House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy issued this statement: Marjorie is wrong in her intentional decision to compare the horrors of the Holocaust with wearing masks is appalling. The Holocaust is the greatest atrocity committed in history. The fact that this needs to be stated today is deeply troubling. Now, today's rebukes come after a number of prominent conservatives and Jewish groups not only condemned Greene's reprehensible comments for days, but also noted the silence of the Republican congressional leadership over the course of those 4+ days. Back with me, CNN's Nia Malika Henderson and Tarini Parti of the Wall Street Journal. And so Marjorie Taylor Greene, I have a 7-tweet thread here, is upset. Remember, these were Republican leaders who finally finally, they call themselves leaders. They followed in this case 4.5 days before they finally condemned her. She says in the final tweet of this 7-tweet rant that has a whole bunch of conspiracy in it and things that aren't true, then it says, "I'm sorry, some of my words make people uncomfortable. But this is what the American left is all about. And they are America last in every single way." This is about her. This is not about the American left. A vaccine passport, some people favor them, some people oppose them. A mask mandate on the floor of the House of Representatives saves lives, protects people, is not the Holocaust.
Right, and she's not apologizing either in her tweet. She's basically saying, "I'm sorry, I'm not sorry for what I said." And she, took out the references to the Holocaust, but she basically said the same thing, that people who aren't getting vaccinated are being discriminated against, and then attacking the left and the Democrats. But I think it's interesting what Republicans have done, too, in their response. They're trying to sort of put it on Democrats in a way. They're pointing out the anti-Semitism in the Democratic Party, and sort of trying to shift the focus away from the Congresswoman here in their response.
Right, clean your house. Clean your house before you want to attack someone else's house. And again, you get to the point where, okay, why did it take 5 days? Right? They will say, well, we weren't aware of this. They all have staffs that make them very much aware of these things. If they weren't aware of them, they should fire their staff and get a better staff. Because Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I apologize for even doing this, but they always say, don't believe the mainstream media. Marjorie Taylor Greene has a history of saying crazy things.
Many Americans are like blind sheep, just going through life, not paying attention.
There is an Islamic invasion into our government offices right now.
The so-called plane that crashed into the Pentagon. It's odd, there's never any evidence shown for a plane in the Pentagon. Kennedy getting killed in the plane crash. That's another one of those Clinton murders, right?
So the Republican quote-unquote leadership should be on guard, to be prepared for her, number one. These reactions came only after a great number of conservatives, American Jewish groups, people in the media talked about this. One of them was Jeff Miller, who's a former advisor to McCarthy, a former advisor to Trump, was part of a fundraising bundler, raised a lot of money for the Trump campaign. I'm going to read a little bit of his tweet this morning. "WTF is wrong with you? I think you need to pay a visit to the U.S. Holocaust Museum. I'd be happy to arrange. Then maybe going forward you wouldn't make any more disgusting, ignorant, and offensive tweets."
The thing about Marjorie Taylor Greene is she's clearly anti-Muslim, anti-trans, anti-Semitic, but she's also one of the most famous, popular, powerful Republicans in the country. She's a powerhouse at fundraising. She's a powerhouse on social media, very much like Trump was in the beginning of his ascent in 2015. And I think that explains the delay. These Republicans who ousted her from the committees because of some of these statements she made knows that she has a direct line into Trump. I think she's the closest political person to Trump in terms of her approach to politics. All of the sort of white identity politics, the grievance politics, everyone is a victim in her view. And those are the people who are backing her. Those are the people who are showing up at these pretty sizable crowds as she goes around the country with another figure who's also akin to Trump in Matt Gaetz. So listen, I mean, all of this just helps her profile. It helps boost her among those grassroots folks in Trump country. And Trump, of course, likes her as well. And so I think that explains the fear.
And you make the salient point in the sense that there are days when I think, I'm not doing this on television. I'm not giving her any more time. I'm not helping her raise money. And people say, why do you point it out if she's a nut job? Well, because this is part of something bigger. Trump calls her a rising star. Trump says, do not have a January 6th commission. I don't want it. And they all say, yes, sir. And so this is part of the problem. It's the Grand Ostrich Party, whether it's Marjorie Taylor Greene sticking your head in the sand to ignore what she says, or sticking your head in the sand about we don't want to know the truth.
Right, and it's also important to see how Republican leaders, how Democrats, how they respond to something like this. It's newsworthy at this point. I mean, not everything she says, of course, as we said, is newsworthy, but this has gotten to the point where there needs to be some sort of response from the leadership, which is what we got today.
Right, and when someone does this, I'm sorry, you just can't call yourself a leader and wait 5 days. You just can't. Up next for us, some brand new data on Moderna vaccine in kids aged 12 to 17. major positive COVID announcement today. The drug maker Moderna says its coronavirus vaccine is safe and appears off the charts effective for children as young as 12. In a trial for kids 12 to 17, none developed COVID after being fully vaccinated. The findings have not been peer-reviewed yet, but Moderna says it plans to ask the FDA next month for authorization to offer its vaccine to those 12 and over. Remember, Pfizer already has that okay, and adding Moderna would help the push to get more children vaccinated heading into summer activities and next year's school year as well. Let's look at the latest numbers, and they are overwhelmingly positive. Look at our 50-state map. You see all that green? 37 states, 37 of the 50 reporting fewer new COVID infections now compared to a week ago. 3 states trending up. You see the gray, Alabama and Delaware. That just means they have a glitch in their data, so we're not looking at their data today. They're just trying to fix an anomaly. 37 states trending in the right direction. That's because of this. The case count nationally is way down. 25,925 new COVID infections reported yesterday. Look up here. The 7-day average is below 25,000. The last time that was true was almost a year ago, back in June of 2020. A dramatic drop. Why the dramatic drop? Well, in large part because of this. 131 million, almost 130 plus million Americans fully vaccinated. Partially vaccinated, 164 million Americans. The vaccination rollout is helping push the cases down. Now let's look at vaccination by age. Half of American adults, by the end of this day, half of American adults will be fully vaccinated. You see 19.5% among those aged 16 and 17. This age group, 12 to 15, just now eligible for the Pfizer vaccine. By next month, maybe the Moderna vaccine as well. So the 12 to 15 age group, we'll see that go up. Age 12 and younger, we're still waiting for the vaccine to be approved. So you have the 0 here. So younger students probably don't get a vaccine by the time they go back to school. But listen to Dr. Fauci here. He says the situation is improving so much that he believes, yes, this group's going to have to wait a bit, but that everybody should be able to go back to school come September.
I don't believe that they're going to be able to be vaccinated by the time the fall term comes. We certainly will get high school adolescent individuals vaccinated then. Given the number of and the percentage of teachers that will be vaccinated, that are already vaccinated, that there should be no reason not to get children of any age back to in-person school by the time we get to the fall term.
With us to share her expertise and insights, the former Baltimore City Health Commissioner, Dr. Leana Wen. Dr. Wen, it's great to see you. Help me with the context of this moment. It is a remarkable moment in that the vaccine rollout has been largely successful. Now it appears you'll have a second vaccine for those in the 12 to 16, 17 age group. But the younger group, I have a fourth grader who'll be in fifth grade next year. They're going to have to wait a little bit. So we're in this odd place where you and I can go outside. We can take our mask off because we're vaccinated. Even in some indoor settings, we take our mask off because we're vaccinated. But the little guy still has to wear a mask. How long are we in this strange period?
Well, I think we first have to celebrate where we are, John, because we've been talking about bad news for so long. And now there's finally excellent news that finally the rates of infections, hospitalizations, deaths are trending down quite substantially. I think the worst is behind us and we're going to have a much better summer ahead. I also think it's really promising that we now are able to get 12-year-olds and above vaccinated with Pfizer, maybe soon with Moderna. They can go back to their normal lives and have sleepovers and parties and indoor get-togethers again, which is going to be really important. And come the fall, I do think we're going to be in an even better place because we'll have a much lower rate of infection, hopefully, across the country. And then younger kids, even if they're not yet vaccinated, will feel a lot safer too. But I do think it's important to note, as you said, that young kids are still at risk because they're not yet vaccinated. And actually, unvaccinated people across the country are still at risk for contracting coronavirus. So get vaccinated if you can. But if you are a person under the age of 12 and cannot be vaccinated, you should still be taking a lot of precautions, including masking, physical distancing, and avoiding indoor crowded settings.
So help me with this one. I want to play a little bit from a hearing this morning, a long-term issue. I know we're both parents. This is not asking for a friend. This is asking for myself and for every parent out there. How do we deal with this?
The mental health and developmental issues that these kids have been through in the last year. Like I took my youngest to Costco. She hadn't been in a big box store. It kind of flipped her out seeing that many people.
I think we're all really concerned about this. People sort of shrug and say, well, you know, kids are resilient, but wait a minute. This is really an incredible, unprecedented challenge to their life experience. There's a lot of unanswered questions we are going to be studying.
Walk us through that.
Yeah, I certainly agree that it's been such a challenging year for everyone, for our children, for families, for caregivers, for people who have lost loved ones, for others that have just experienced really significant disruptions to their lives and livelihoods. I think with children, it's important to meet them where they are, to have conversations with your children and find out, are they ready to go back to school? Are they ready to go back to normal? Are there things that they were particularly looking forward to that they can now do? Understanding too that children, just like the rest of us as adults, we need to be moving at our own pace. Some people are ready to dive in and do everything and resume all their sporting activities and extracurriculars. Others might still feel a bit of a shock at re-engaging with people, especially without masks and distancing. And so I think taking things at your own pace, opening the door to having these difficult conversations is an important first step.
Great advice, as always. Dr. Leana Wen, grateful for your time today.
Thank you,
Up next for us, thank you. Up next for us, $1,000 if you go back to work. We'll talk to the governor giving that incentive next.
Do you see the big athletes get a signing bonus? Why don't you get a signing bonus as well?
Labor shortages are leading some states to try creative incentives to lure unemployed people back to work. In Connecticut this week, Governor Ned Lamont announced a $1,000 signing bonus for the first 10,000 long-term unemployed workers who land full-time jobs. Governor Lamont is with us live now. Governor, walk through the challenge here. We've seen government incentives to get people vaccinated. Why did you decide it was necessary? Let's try a signing bonus. I like that term, and I like your athlete's metaphor. A signing bonus to get people, try a little harder, get a full-time job.
Yeah, we have an awful lot of jobs that are unfilled. John, great to see you. And especially in the service sector, restaurants, stores and the such, having a hard time. We got some people who are sort of COVID hesitant still. So we said, look, if we get you a $1,000 signing bonus, make it a little easier for you to do daycare, a little easier for you to handle the transportation, make it easier for you to get to work. We'll know in a week or so whether it's working.
So you say, you know, some COVID hesitancy. So I found that interesting. I just want to look up on the screen. 8.1% is in April was your state unemployment rate. That's a little above the national average. Some of your Republican colleagues who are governors are trying something else. 23 Republican-led states are now ending the extra unemployment benefits, the enhanced unemployment benefits that were awarded during COVID. Good idea or bad idea?
We're not going to do that. Look, they end by themselves in 3 months, which I think is probably appropriate. Right now, we're trying to gently get people back into the workforce. I think the $1,000 incentive will make a big difference over the course of the next 6 weeks. And then you're going to see those $300 probably disappear in September.
And another concern at the moment is, the president passed the big rescue plan. Now he has other plans he's trying to get through the Congress. Most Democrats are on board. A lot of that money would go to states like yours, some of it directly to states to help state and local governments, some of it through infrastructure projects, some of it through other economic development projects. Larry Summers, the former Treasury Secretary, is concerned about this, though. He says he's starting to see evidence of inflation in the economy. He says the moment has come to move past emergency policies and fight for our country's long-term future. Is Larry Summers right? Has the moment come for the president maybe to say, let's put less federal money into the economy?
No, I think that the tax credit's important. I think we're able to provide free summer school learning camps for our kids who have been out of school for, many of them for a year, even though our schools were open. We have free daycare and childcare for everybody through the end of the year. I think these are all ways that we're using this federal support to help people get back to work. And I think the infrastructure money will be very helpful. Look, if you think we should do it over 6 years and not 3 years, that makes some sense as well. But I think this is a good time to be rebuilding.
We've had several conversations when things were horrible, especially your part of the country went through the first crushing wave, and then we had the winter peak as well. Now we're in much better times. And so let's say we've been talking about jobs here. What's your sense when it comes to schools? The New York City mayor just said come September, he wants all New York City kids back in the school. He thinks everything will be very safe by then, no more remote learning. Should that be the plan in Connecticut as well?
That's the plan in Connecticut as well. But, John, frankly, almost all of our schools were open last September, either in-person full-time or hybrid. But I do worry there were some kids that just didn't feel comfortable getting back to school. Those are the ones we're working on really hard.
The New England states have outpaced the rest of the country in terms of the vaccine rollout. Why? Why do you think that's the case?
I think we were hit particularly hard very early. We've worked together very closely. I think that we were more likely to be wearing the mask than they were, say, in Arizona. Governor of Arizona told me something very interesting. Doug Ducey, good guy. He said, Governor, it's probably easier for you to get people to do the masks and vaccinations because everybody knows somebody who died of COVID. In my state, we tend to know somebody who lost their job due to COVID.
And lastly, on this point of economic reopening, you had a lot of coordination with your neighbors because you're all held together because so many people in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and even Rhode Island, but those three in particular, commute back and forth. Are you doing the same when it comes to this economic stuff, or is it every governor on his own now?
Oh, look, we talk a fair amount, but everybody is sort of opening at their own pace. We've opened pretty early. We never closed construction. We've kept most of our companies going. Our manufacturing never stopped. So now we've opened everything. The only last thing is if you haven't been vaccinated, wear the mask indoors. Do that a little bit longer.
Governor Ned Lamont of Connecticut, grateful to see you, sir.
Nice to see you, John. Thanks.
Take care. Up next for us, the Secretary